What do you feel is one of the most misunderstood things when it comes to Nebraska and the technology scene in Nebraska?
That it's not just a lot of large companies. Like we definitely have that strong, insurance, uh, fintech presence, but there are a lot of great startups here, many more than ever than I've seen before.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think more than you've ever seen before?
I think the community is just getting stronger around it. So one of the biggest issues that funders or founders say they run into is access to funding, and I think those are just becoming more obvious is the best word because it's like not easy to get funding. That's just a real thing, but they're more prominent, so more known, and the community is a lot stronger around it. So it seems that if you are a founder, it's easier to find that support and community, like through 1 Million Cups and the work that Charlie Cuddy and his team are leading through the Nebraska Startup Academy and many others that are working in the same space to make it easier for startups to be successful long term.
Love it. Charlie's a longtime friend of our podcast.
Right.
So
Yeah.
uh, fantastic. So you are the executive director of the Nebraska Tech Collaborative as well as Intern Nebraska. Can you tell me what are those two and how do they differ?
Yeah. So the Nebraska Tech Collaborative, I'll start with that since it's the most mature of the two initiatives. They're both under the Xarvin Foundation, which some people don't know, but we have four initiatives that are within the Xarvin Foundation, all focused on workforce development in various aspects. So I lead two. The others are Growing Together Northeast Nebraska and Full Value Agriculture, run by two brilliant friends of mine, Hank Robinson and Angie Stenger. Um, but Nebraska Tech Collaborative was founded in 2018 to help bridge Nebraska's tech workforce gap and then also address some other items like increasing the percentage of women in tech and also percentage of diverse individuals in tech, and also support the growth of 300 tech startups by 2025. So those goals are big. The add to the workforce goal was to add 10,000 workers by 2025, 10,000 tech workers. And while we've achieved many of these goals, and I'll talk about a couple we haven't achieved or we've missed the mark on, but while we've achieved the goal, for example, to increase the number of tech workers in this time frame, many of our companies are still saying we don't have the right talent mix, right? The right skill set, the right skill set, proficiency level, all those things. And also, Nebraska has historically lost some of our smartest and most well educated individuals. Like we lose about 4,000 people a year. So that is a big impact on this topic as well, because it really starts to impact the balance when you think of like a lot of entry level talent coming into the pipeline, which is fantastic. We need that. But we also need to retain that skilled engineering talent for the long term with our company. So this is kind of why startups are so critical, because they add more interesting work to the mix in the state. So it's just like it all works together. But one area where we've actually lost a lot of ground is women in tech. So the data that we have from UNO's Center for Public Affairs Research, who we work with for all of our data tracking, like how the workforce is trending, shows us that we've gone from about 36%-ish women in tech in 2016, and our target was to help get it to 40%, to as of 2022 down to around 25% participation. And depending on who you talk to, that is not very obvious in the workforce, but we're trying to dig into why that might be happening. But that's certainly an area of opportunity for Nebraska.
Where are a lot of the technologists going? Like if they're leaving Nebraska, what is pulling them away and where are they actually heading?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's something that we're digging into with our data person, or her team, I should say. But yeah, we know that there were some exits due to COVID and just what is possible now, where you can live elsewhere, work here, which I did. I moved to Florida and South Dakota while working for Mutual of Omaha during COVID. So we were, and still, I think Mutual still is a 100% remote workforce at this point for the roles where that works for. But yeah, I'm sure a lot of different reasons. Some women have stated that they'll drop out if they don't feel as supported or there's that opportunity for growth and mentorship, things like that. But this is all anecdotal. I don't have data to back this up. These are just things that I've heard from some of the people in my network.
So if I understand you correctly, the companies, the jobs, they're here, or at least they want to be, but they're having a hard time finding the appropriately experienced individuals to fill those roles. Is that accurate?
That's part of it, and I think over the last year or so, a lot of companies have slowed their hiring when it comes to that, like, early career individual. So, interns are great because you can invest in them over a couple of years, a couple of summers, year-round internships, things like that. But when you start talking about a full W-2, most likely higher salary band, even in that 1 to 3 year range, it just the risk is a lot higher. They're still not at the maybe at the right skill level that a lot of companies are looking for, because they really are looking for, from what I'm hearing from our partners, is that mid career type who still has a long runway in their career. So, it's tricky.
Not to put you on the spot, but what solutions are there? Because it's not training up a new workforce if that's not what they're looking for. It's bringing in that established one. Is it more about just bringing people back to Nebraska? Or what solutions is it to actually start filling a lot of those roles that companies are actually hiring for right now?
I think it's a combination of things, and there are so many factors at play at this point, right? So it's complicated, and everyone who's thinking about leaving probably has a different reason for doing so, whether that's salary or wanting different weather circumstances, different amenities, closer to family, you name it. There are many different reasons, but I would say that some of the best solutions that we've seen working so far on a very small scale, but can be scaled, are the companies that will invest in current talent, so incumbent workers who have the business acumen, right? Because let's say it's Mutual of Omaha, for example. If you take a person who is a supervisor in the claims department, they usually have a pretty deep level of understanding of what it takes to process the claim effectively and just understand the business of insurance and all of that, from their skill set. But if you take a person like that and send them through a code school type of program so that they can leverage their business acumen, but in a technical space, they can start to add a lot of value immediately. And we've seen that at Mutual. Plus, typically individuals like that who a company invests in are more likely to stay with that company for the longer term. You may not keep them forever, but they can add a tremendous amount of value shortly. So that's one way to shortcut it. The other is, like, a quick solution is pay more, but that is such a short-sighted solution, because if you're able to attract someone with pay, you'll lose them to pay. So I think there are many things that we have to do that are more kind of like long game strategies. But the only reason we're in this, or one of the reasons we're in this position, I don't want to speak like this is the reason why, but one of the reasons we're in this position is because it's been such a market where you could just pay more and attract people. And that still works to an extent, but the retention rates are so much lower over time.
Shauna, I want to dig into all of these. I feel like I'm creating like 10 questions every time you speak,
I
but I
know.
want to
And
I want to take it.
I'm
No,
just
you're
laughing
killing
a
it.
little bit because I'm like, it's so interesting to me. And didn't even tell you what Intern Nebraska is yet.
I can that's exactly where I'm going. Is I can feel your passion, and I can feel you want to dive in and hit these amazing talking points. But can I back up a little bit and
Absolutely.
learn a little bit about you?
Yeah.
So Shauna, let's start with what motivated you to take on that role of executive director at TC?
Great question. So at the time, I was living in Florida, and I would say that of all the jobs I ever had working for Mutual remotely as an HR manager of a small workforce development team, like I think we were like 5 to 7 direct reports. That's a pretty um, simple workload to manage, especially when those individuals are, go getters and do what needs to be done for the team. So it was very challenging for me to even consider leaving. But I was approached by Mike Lechtenberger, actually the CIO of Mutual of Omaha, who I've known him for a very long time. He is the chair of NTC's executive committee right now, and obviously I worked with him while I was at Mutual of Omaha. But one day he was like, "Hey, the person who was in this role exited recently, and we think that you should consider applying for this job." And funnily, I had applied for it the first time it was available and wasn't selected. Someone else was. But it's one of those things where, timing is everything, because that was like right before COVID and things just got weird in the world for a while. But so anyway, after that person exited, and I was just like, this position probably isn't for me, but I can help you find somebody. It was my mindset at the time. But just after thinking about it for a while, I was like, I'm doing workforce development within Mutual of Omaha, and that only impacts our company's workforce. If I can come back to Nebraska and work on the NTC, which could potentially impact the state's workforce, that is very interesting and compelling to me. And plus, if I fail, it's like uh, a big drop versus, the safety of working within a big company like Mutual of Omaha, which is an exciting thing to me. Maybe weird to say, but it is exciting to me to take those like big leaps. So I kind of had to talk myself into it, especially since it was wintertime when this conversation.
So you lived in Florida, you get a call. It's what you want. It's your passion. It's a little risky, which I feel you like, which is fantastic. But you're sitting in Florida in wintertime, and they're like, "Yeah, come on back to Nebraska." Where if anyone's ever been in Nebraska in the winter, we know it's god awful cold. Uh,
That
that's funny, but really, really empowering that you made such a giant leap in your life to come here, take on a humongous challenge, and also at the chance of being able to impact an ever-growing gigantic workforce. That's really fascinating. Before we dive into the intern,
okay.
um, with the NTC, you know, cultivating a tech ecosystem. Um, what does that mean? What exactly are you doing at the NTC? Forgive my ignorance, but I
Yeah.
realize I've been asking these questions assuming I know what you do, but I don't. What does that mean?
It's super fair because, when you think about, and we'll talk about the intern program, that is so much easier for people to get their heads around. With the NTC, it's really like called the Nebraska Tech Collaborative for a reason, because we don't do a lot of programming. We know that there are, like, the AIM Institute has the Heartland Developers Conference, which is great. So one of the things we do, for example, would be to say, hey, community partners, all NTC partners, you should send your folks to HCC. You should make sure that you submit proposals to speak at HTC, because the more individuals who see smart people from Nebraska based companies talking about the work that they do within their companies, the more interesting our companies are to people. And like, we have to be promoting ourselves. If you look at the NTC social channel, we are super active and have been since early January in telling stories of things that people are doing here, and then also the great companies that exist here. So a lot of it is like amplifying the brands of others, a lot of that. Um, and then that's on the social side, but I'll back up a little bit. So I talked a bit about the data project that we led last year. We have two of them in flight right now. But one other thing that we do is provide data to Nebraskans who are interested in what's happening with the workforce. So the reports we have are not for us. They do influence our work, but we really just want everyone to have insights into what's happening, what's trending, and then so that they can look at that data and say, okay, how can I contribute to moving things in a better direction? Outside of that, we have three categories that we work in: emerging talent, which is basically anyone who's not in tech; experienced talent, so people who are in tech want to advance and get connected; and then entrepreneurs, which, I talked about a little bit. But yeah, we work in those three categories, and typically have projects that are led by NTC partners and things like that.
Thank you for that explanation. That makes a lot of sense, actually. So let's talk about the intern program. What is that?
Okay, so Intern Nebraska, it's been around for about 11 years, but last year the Department of Economic Development at the state decided to bring in a partner to help them market the program to companies throughout Nebraska and provide access to different engagement events and activities to support businesses. And so Xarvin was selected for that. And we launched the Intern Any Powered by Xarvin initiative. So it's a $20 million 2-year grant funded by the state. And just so everyone gets this, the state manages the entire grant process. So you apply, you're selected or not, you get reimbursed reimbursed or not, depending on eligible expenses. But the state manages that entire process end to end. And what we do with Xarvin is we visit all the community college regions across the state. So there are 6. So we've been to every single one and have had at least one in-person event since February of this year, 2024. But we visit those communities and build relationships with the local chambers of commerce are very important because they have access to businesses, the local community colleges, the workforce engine of the state, and also students and businesses, et cetera. But really, we're all about connecting all of those players together with each other to streamline that process from like, I applied for the program, I was selected by the state. Now I want to connect with, engage with candidates and hire the right candidate for my open positions.
So, who is it that you're targeting to become an intern? Is it just high school students, people in college? Who's your ideal person to get in there?
Yeah, the great thing is the state has made it pretty flexible. So it's like high school, juniors, seniors, college students, non traditional students as well. So if you go through like a short term certificate program, you would qualify to be an intern for an Intern Nebraska company. Also, anyone who's graduated from said program within the past 12 months. So it's pretty open.
Are you seeing it mostly used here in the eastern part of the state within Lincoln, Omaha, or is it being used pretty broadly, especially in more rural towns?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's a population play, right? And like where the most businesses are. So we for sure see the majority of internships in Omaha and Lincoln. But as of February of this year, I'm sorry, is it February? Anyway, it's a month between February and May. But within the first quarter of the year, we had awardees in all 6 community college regions, whereas the cycle before that, we only had 5 of 6. So it's great to see. I'm like, even if we get one business in that community, that's all we need to start. I'm always like, it just takes one. That's all we have to do. But yeah, now we have participation in all 6 regions throughout the state.
I love it. We always we hear. I live in Southwest Nebraska, and it's nice to see a lot of these programs actually gaining traction and adoption in there because you hear a lot of people complaining that there's not always things happening, but in reality, a lot of times it's just the local community not quite utilizing what's available to them. So it's great to see that it's happening.
Yeah, for sure. And it's Nebraska is very much a relationship based state. And we're like, we have to go to these places. We can't just be like, hey, come on a Zoom call with us. I mean, sure, but we're like, we're just gonna hit the road and make this happen. So
Real quick, Shauna, you said six community college areas. What are those six? So Lincoln and Omaha, obviously, right?
yeah, so I'll give you the names. We'll work east to west. So you've got Metro, and that's the Omaha area. Northeast, so Norfolk, Wayne State, that area. Southeast, Lincoln.
Good.
Central Community College region is like Kearney, Grand Island. Mid Plains is like North Platte, McCook, and then Western Nebraska Community College region is like Scottsbluff, et cetera. And I can't leave out my friends in Broken Bow. They're also in the Mid Plains area, but they're great out there. So yeah, it spans the entire state. And then also when you get to that Western Nebraska Community College region, it's actually a massive region geographically. But just because of the population numbers, it just doesn't serve as many students, but it's massive. So it just gets a little tricky when you get to those bigger regions in the western part of the state.
It's a really clever tactic to partner with the community colleges because exactly as you said, Nebraska is a very big state.
Mhm.
Small population, big geographically. And gosh, Tanner McCook to Omaha is what, 4.5, 5 hours if you're slow. Um, and that's driving across the entire southern part of the state. And you are able to partner with these community colleges to find talent that may otherwise be lost, maybe in the shuffle, and and tell them about these fascinating opportunities that are out there that they may not have known about otherwise. I grew up in the McCook area myself. I'm very familiar with living in rural Nebraska, and one of the main reasons Tanner and I started our podcast here is it's called Decentralized Opportunity. There are opportunities everywhere. You don't have to be in Silicon Valley or Austin, Texas, or New York to find amazing opportunities for your skill sets and your passions. And you are doing exactly that. You're tapping into the potential future workforce of this. I think that's a fascinating way to go about this and reach an entire gigantic state in one fell swoop. So that's
Yeah,
amazing.
for sure. And I think too, it's for us, it for sure is about the students. But when we think about this, we're like, we want to help businesses see this as a resource for them to grow their workforce.
Sure.
Because we're like, if they have more opportunities, then we can sell that to the student population a lot easier versus like, hey, get on the platform and there may or may not be a position in your region.
Fair.
So, um, but yeah, we're really big on just that business buy-in and support.
And it's not just about shuttling everyone to Omaha or Lincoln,
Not at all.
which
And
in
hilarious.
rural area, it seems to be kind of the go-to thing. If you want a good job or something like that, you got to move to Omaha or Lincoln. And that's not necessarily true. You're working to keep people in thriving communities that may not be a city.
Yeah, for sure. And the interesting thing is that there's some data that came out of the Nebraska Community Foundation that said students who, or young people, however you want to put it, who live in some of the smaller communities around the state, don't necessarily want to leave there, but there just aren't many opportunities there. So the more that we can help businesses with resources to create those opportunities, the better. So that's definitely part of it. And I always laugh because when we first started this, I was like, guys, I know for a fact that it will be easiest for us to get like many businesses in Omaha and Lincoln to participate, but our goal cannot be to get everyone from Western Nebraska to come to Omaha for a job. Like that's defeating the purpose. So let's make it work everywhere in the state.
Yeah. So if I can double click in on that, what are the resources available to a company in a rural community or any part of Nebraska? How can they start tapping into where they can utilize not just more people within the workforce, but specifically highly trained people within technology in their workforce?
That's a good question. So if we're talking about Intern Nebraska specifically, I can talk about the training resource. I'm sorry, the resources available to businesses there, which can free up operating dollars in the future. It is a reimbursement grant, so it's like up to $7,500 matching per intern, and a company can bring on up to 25 interns per year through this grant, which is great, and use the funding for that. That 25 is based on the number of full-time employees you have. So one FTE equals one intern that you can bring on. So there's that. But it pays for training and tuition. So if a business were to bring on an intern that needed some additional training and whatever that is, it doesn't have to be a Nebraska training provider either, but any type of training. They could use the grant to help offset that cost. The grant can help pay for housing, transportation costs for that student or intern, and administrative costs related to running the grant. So if a company were to contract out some service or support for the intern program, they could potentially use the grant for that as well. And this program, that part of the grant works for companies of all sizes, but for companies that have 149 employees or fewer, and that went up from 50 this year due to some legislation that passed. But for companies with 149 or fewer full-time employees in Nebraska, they can use the grant to help offset wages, which can be a big deal.
Yeah.
It also helps to drive up, hopefully, the hourly wage for the intern because they can offer to potentially pay more if they know they can get reimbursed for part of that expense.
What kind of successes are you seeing? From the business side? Are you seeing a lot more businesses begin to adopt this? Is that growing?
We have close to about 200 awarded companies at this point, and it's over 1,000 internship positions, and there are a lot of great jobs. There's tech adjacent, great hourly rates too. We have one software developer internship that is paying $30 an hour. So they're not, coffee grabber type of jobs. But
Sure.
yeah, great participation, I think, and great opportunities as well for these students to really get into an internship where it can help them decide if this is a career path they truly want to pursue because they're using a skill they're learning in school, maybe trying to build upon. So yeah.
What is the conversion over to like full time after an internship? What have you seen there? Because that's oftentimes a track of like, oh, I can get my foot in the door and then maybe get a job at that company or something similar.
Yeah, so the program is pretty new. I think too new to answer that question because it just started in October of last year. So it'll probably be a couple years before we see those outcomes. And then it's not only, in my opinion, conversion, it's retention and promotion. Like how soon are those students ready to be moved from an entry level software developer to that next tier? Because again, that going back to our first part of this conversation, that is part of the issue, is that like proficiency level. So really getting people moved along their career pathway, which we'll see in like 3 to 5 more years. So ask me in 2029.
All right. I'll put that on my calendar. You'll just get a random DM or something.
But I did want to go back to Wyatt's question about the stickiness, because that is part of what Xarvin is offering, right? That grant piece is so important. But the stickiness of the program, we think that through like speed networking events, different panel discussions we'll hold for industry leaders to interact with students, which rarely happens unless it's a career fair or you have a guest speaker come in, but really just giving these students more opportunities to interact with employers regularly. It just boosts confidence for those students, just helps them understand the great jobs in Nebraska. So we're working on doing a lot more of that throughout the year and throughout the state.
So I wanted to just completely mix up the order we've been talking about,
Yeah.
and I want to go back to NTC for a second. And you hit on something, and I want to allow you to spend more time on that. You mentioned diversity, specifically women in tech. What are some of the initiatives that are going on right now to help promote that? I mean, you mentioned, was there 14% drop over 3 or 4 years of women in tech fields in Nebraska? That's a statistically significant number.
Yeah.
So what's going on? What are some of the not opportunities, what are some of the initiatives going on right now to help bolster those numbers?
Yeah, I'll talk a bit about what we're doing, but I think that some of the work that like the Prairie STEM, they're a nonprofit based here in Omaha, that the work that they're doing to encourage more young girls to participate in tech is super important. There's also the Peter Kiewit Foundation has an engineering academy that is has a lot of young women participating in that, and with a lot of support and mentorship, career services, all of that important stuff connected to it. And also, UNO's College of Information Science and Technology has reported that they're seeing their number of women in the program grow, and also diverse women grow, which is super important. So I think that these are the things that have to continue to happen, and we have to all be intentional about making sure those young women feel connected to the workforce before they even graduate. So those things are key. And then within the NTC, we have 2 programs that we're supporting this year, and we'll continue to look at more opportunities next year. But one is with UNMC's Unitech. They have a program called Women in STEAM through Opportunity Corps. And through that program, they have 25 early career women in various STEAM type of roles, and they're paired with a mentor for 9 months. I'm sorry, 6 months. And the whole purpose of that program is to, build those relationships. They'll learn some skills about in entrepreneurship. They have a panel of leaders come in every month, and some single guest speakers come in every month. Typically, women are featured, but again, just to help them see themselves in these leadership roles within the STEAM pathway. We also have a group called Nebraska Women of Color in Tech, and this group was started up from a conversation or over at a roundtable last year, where I met with a group of women for this event that I recruited them all to via LinkedIn. And they were all diverse women. They all worked in tech. And I asked, or we were just talking, and they were like, I'm usually the only person or one of a few women or women of color in tech or within my department. And I was like, is there a group right now that exists to help you all get connected to each other? They said, no. I said, cool, I'll start it. And so that's the short version of it. But yeah, we started that group up last September, and we have about 120 members at this point. And our entire goal with this program is to, or meetup group, is to introduce more people to diverse women in tech. So the speakers, presenters are only diverse women in tech, but anybody is welcome to join that group. So that group itself is pretty diverse. It has white men in it, Black men in it, women of all nationalities. So it's pretty diverse, but the speakers are diverse women in tech. So
Wonderful.
Yeah. But I think there's a lot of good work happening, but I don't think that a lot of the folks are aware of that drop. And so that's the reason this data is so important, so that we can say, hey, here's what we're seeing. Now, this is a targeted thing we can decide to work on.
So, Shonna, what are some major projects, major initiatives you're working on right now?
Yes, the big one for the NTC is, I mentioned that we have our 3 categories with a lot of different projects I didn't go into, but I'll send you a sheet if you want to share it.
Love it.
Uh,
Yes.
but we have, emerging talent, experienced talent entrepreneurs, but really thinking about breaking down that emerging talent category even more. So thinking about like what is happening in the K through 6 space that we can help elevate, amplify, and then K through 8, I should say, and then the high school space, college. So really just thinking about more ways to build the pipeline at each level, who the players are, making sure folks are connected. So more to come on that, but that's an important project as far as I'm concerned, because I love the idea of system wide changes and also making sure that it's not just like if the NTC went away tomorrow that all this work would stop, because there's a lot of great work happening. But it's just like, how do we connect it a little better so we all know what part we play and where proper handoffs exist and we can support each other without stepping into each other's lanes too much, even though that's just something that will happen. So yeah, that's the biggie with the NTC. And then with the intern program, just continuing to make sure that we get as many businesses on board and connected to as many students as possible, because this is a 2-year program, but we hope to see it last much longer than that.
Shauna, thank you so much for joining us. I guess if people want to dive in, we'll include links in the show notes, but any specific places you'd want to direct them to get more information about NTC, the intern program, or where to find you?
Yeah. So I'm most active on LinkedIn. It's my favorite social media channel or platform of all time. So go there. But for Nebraska Tech Collaborative, nebtechcollab.com, and then intern neb.org has just a ton of great resources for anybody who wants to learn more or share information about that initiative. So
I'm a father of 4 daughters, so and 2 of them very interested in tech. This is very exciting to me. I'm so glad to hear that these programs exist out there. Once again, I think your ability to partner with community colleges and be able to reach the vast majority of the giant state of Nebraska is truly impressive. You're doing amazing work, even if you have to suffer through Nebraska winters instead of laying on a beach in Florida. You're doing great work, Shauna, but I really appreciate you coming on the show this evening and sharing this with us. I think there's great work being done there, and we get to see some amazing entrepreneurs and amazing minds on this show, and you are kind of filling a gap, I think, with who we speak to in how do they connect? How do you actually get them from learning the skill set to getting hired and getting that job? And
right.
it's really cool to see this entire pipeline that's being built with all of the minds trying to bolster Nebraska. So thank you for your work.
Yeah, definitely. Before we wrap up, I do want to give a shout out to Megan Bell. So we just hired her on our team last December. And during our interview, I was like, this is going to be a road show type of job. And she was all for it and has been just a great, great partner to have out there at a lot of our community events. We just did one for the CWS in Omaha, and it was so well attended and appreciated by our partner companies and interns who, how would they ever connect with another intern who doesn't work at their company easily? Right. So we were just like, let's just create more of those collision opportunities. So anyway, I just appreciate her and wanted to say thanks.
Love
Yeah,
it.
well, as a fellow road warrior, I can definitely appreciate that. So, yeah, shout out to her.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and thanks to everybody who made it to the end. Make sure to find some more information, reach out to Shauna, connect on LinkedIn, which is her favorite platform. And I don't know if it's mine. It's probably like my 4th favorite, but that could save that for another day. And but yeah, like, subscribe, and share, and we will see everybody next week. Bye bye.